Good afternoon, everybody. I am not Stacy Fong. Unfortunately, Stacy is not able to make it to the training. And so I am stepping in for her role. I am Liana Barbu, and I am a consultant with Sacramento Steps Forward. So I will try to step in for Stacy. And again, I am sorry for that. Let me first introduce the SSF team that will be presenting with me today. Kadia and Marissa, would you please introduce yourselves?
Hey everybody, I'm Kadia. I will be presenting today. A lot of you may know me, of course. I've been with SSF for almost 3 years, and I am a contract analyst.
And I'm Marissa. Some of you may know me. I've been with SSF for a couple years now as well, and looking forward to this presentation today.
Thank you. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A function, and we will address your questions at the end of the presentation. The slideshow will be emailed out to you in a few days. I believe it will also be posted on the website. We are also doing a recording of the presentation, so hopefully everything will be available to you in a few days. So today we are talking about the housing-related requirements for your Continuum of Care funded program. Next slide, please. We will cover today the housing program types, rent reasonableness and fair market rent, lease agreements, housing quality standards, lead-based paint requirements. Next slide, please.
For the housing program types, I'll get into this section here. So housing program types, if we could jump back to the previous slide, please. Okay, so this section is going to cover key housing requirements under the COC program, and we'll look at lease standards, environmental review, rent limits, and the documentation that HUD expects during monitoring. These are common areas for findings, so we're focusing on what matters most for compliance. Next slide, please. The COC program supports two types of permanent housing. That's permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. PSH provides long-term assistance and supportive services, and there's no designated end date. And PSH is for people with disabilities who meet chronic homelessness definition. These projects can either be 100% dedicated to chronic homelessness, or it can be a dedicated plus project. Under chronic homelessness, the head of household must have the disability. Rapid rehousing, on the other hand, is a tenant-based rental assistance for up to 24 months. It includes supportive services and is meant to help participants move into permanent housing. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide compares income and lease rules for PSH, RRH, and TH. None of these housing types have income limits for entry or exit, and income alone can't be a reason to terminate housing. For PSH projects, rent must be calculated using section 578-77 of the COC interim rule, which we will have a separate training for. PSH projects funded with either rental assistance or leasing must charge rent. Rapid rehousing rental assistance must use COC's written standards for determining rent, which is the progressive engagement approach. Lease and sublease agreements, lease expectations are different by housing type. In PSH and RRH, the participant must have a lease or a sublease for at least 1 year. It has to be renewable and terminable only for cause. In TH, participants must have a lease, sublease, or occupancy agreement for at least 1 month, and the total stay cannot exceed 24 months. Every participant must have a signed agreement. Verbal agreements do not count. Next slide, please. Environmental reviews. Okay. All new and renewal COC funded projects must complete an environmental review before committing funds. This includes, okay, can we jump to the last one? I think there's one more. There we go. This includes leasing and rental assistance projects. Reviews must be completed in advance. You cannot commit or spend federal funds until this step is done. HUD requires this under 24 CFR Part 58. The review has to be carried out by a responsible entity, which in Sacramento, our Public Housing Authority conducts the review. Next slide, please. Environmental review responsible entity. So how this works for subrecipients is prior to you receiving your subrecipient agreement, SSF will request a confirmation of your property address, and then SSF will request the ERR from SHRA. And let's see, in very limited circumstances, HUD may perform environmental reviews for COC projects pursuant to 24 CFR 50. If the recipient and there's no responsible entity can be found. So that only happens after HUD confirms that there's no local or state agency that's willing to act. And if you need help identifying who your responsible entity is, please let us know. Next slide, please. And I think we can jump one more slide after this one. Yes, perfect. Okay, environmental review. Environmental review requirements depend on the project type. Tenant-based rental assistance and leasing projects are not subject to Section 58.5. These are considered exempt. Sponsor-based and project-based rental assistance and project-based leasing are considered categorically excluded, but still require a limited scope review. These fall under the category called CENST. You only need one exempt or CENST form per project, not per unit. These forms apply to supportive services only, tenant-based rental assistance, leasing, and sponsor-based rental assistance. If your project includes major rehab, land use conversion, demolition of more than 4 units, or new construction, it requires a full environmental assessment. HUD has clarified through FAQ and training that sponsor-based rental assistance is included, even if the form doesn't list it by name. Next slide, please. We've got some resources. HUD has several tools to help complete environmental reviews. The environmental review flowchart helps you figure out what level of review your project needs. The FAQ guide covers common questions about timing, form types, and responsible entities. And the walkthrough guide explains how to complete reviews for COC leasing or rental projects that don't involve repairs. All 3 resources are linked in the training materials, and please let us know if you need any help applying them to your specific projects. Next slide, please. Now we are on fair market rent and rent reasonableness. This section focuses on fair market rent reasonableness, 2 separate requirements that often get confused. Both are tied to how we assess whether a unit's rent is allowable under COC rules, and what matters most is knowing which rule applies to your funding type and making sure documentation backs it up. Next slide, please. FMR is established by HUD each year and is specific to your local area and unit size. It includes both rent and utilities. The FMR reflects the cost of modest, standard quality housing, not luxury, but also not substandard. These numbers are updated each year and go into an effect on October 1st. You'll want to check the current rates each time you assess a new unit. The FMR limit matters most for leasing funded units. If you're using rental assistance, FMR is not the cap. Rent just has to be reasonable. Next slide, please. Rent reasonableness is required for all units supported with COC rental assistance or leasing. The goal is to make sure COC program participants aren't being overcharged compared to market rates for similar unassisted units. A reasonable rent is one that aligns with other units of the same size in the same area with similar features and utilities. The review must confirm that rent is reasonable compared to similar unassisted units, not more than what the same landlord charges others for similar units. And you'll also consider unit size, type, location, age, amenities, included utilities, and whether any housing services are built into the rent. Okay, next slide, please. Rent reasonableness must be determined before the lease is signed. This is not optional. Your agency must have written policies and procedures for how you complete and document these reviews. Documentation needs to be clear and kept in the file. This test must also be redone if the rent increases, if the lease renews, or other specific triggers occur, which we'll cover next. One common issue we see is leases getting signed before this step is complete. If that happens and the rent is later found to be too high, the unit could be ineligible. If you're ever unsure, please pause and ask. Next slide, please. You must have a rent reasonableness review on file anytime a unit is first inspected and leased, a lease is renewed, a rent increase is requested and approved, there's a 5% or more drop in the published FMR, or if HUD specifically instructs you to complete a new review. These are hard requirements. If any of these events occur and there's no updated rent reasonableness test, HUD could flag it. Please make sure that reviews are current and traceable. Next slide, please. Fair market rent test. SSF has a tool available for you that will tell you whether the total rent falls within FMR. The first step in the tool is entering rent and utility information for the proposed unit. For leasing funded projects, rent must fall within FMR and also meet rent reasonableness. For rental assistance funded projects, the unit doesn't have to fall within FMR, it just needs to pass rent reasonableness. Next slide, please. Next is calculating utilities. You'll enter the expected utility costs for the proposed unit and each of the 3 comps. These amounts should reflect only what the tenant is expected to pay, not what's covered by the landlord. If the exact amounts aren't available, you can check Zillow for similar listings or ask the landlord directly. Then you would use your agency's utility allowance chart, which should be based on SHRA's published utility allowance schedule, which is updated annually for its Housing Choice Voucher program. And it breaks down the utility costs by unit size and type. This gives you an accurate gross rent figure to use in the rent reasonableness calculation. Next slide, please. The last step is entering the details for the 3 comparable units. They must be reasonably similar. Think size, type, location, and amenities. The tool will compare their average total rent, including utilities, to the proposed unit. A unit is considered reasonable if the rent is no more than $50 above the average of the 3 comps. SSF is exploring a tool from affordablehousing.org, but for now, this internal tool is required. Next slide, please. Thank you. Leasing rent limits for units. For COC leasing funds, rent cannot exceed the lower of fair market rent or rent reasonableness. So even if a unit is deemed reasonable at $600, if the FMR is $575, you can only use $575 of COC funds. The difference can be covered by other sources, but we generally try to avoid that. The table here shows 3 examples. In the first column, reasonable rent is $600, but FMR is $575. That means that COC leasing funds are capped at $575. In the other 2 examples, the reasonable rent and FMR are equal, so the full amount can be covered. The key takeaway is that for leasing, FMR is a hard ceiling, even if rent reasonableness says you could pay more. Next slide, please. Rental assistance rent limits. Now let's look at how this works for rental assistance projects. These are a little more flexible and rents can go above FMR, but they still have to meet rent reasonableness. Gross rent includes both the rent paid to the landlord and any utility allowance provided to the tenant. One common source of confusion is that the rental assistance budgets are built using FMR, so it feels like a rent cap. But if the project has savings, for example, from tenant contributions, they may be able to approve higher rents. This can help with competitive rental markets or participants with specific needs, especially when the local housing authority payment standards are higher than FMR, like 105% or 110%. Still, you want to use caution. You have to meet your unit targets and you don't want to overpay for a unit. Rapid rehousing projects need to be especially mindful since the participant has to sustain that rent once COC assistance ends. Also, if they're hoping to bridge into a housing choice voucher, the rent has to fall within housing authority standards or they won't be eligible. Next slide, please. We've got some more resources. This HUD Exchange resource breaks down the relationship between rent reasonableness and fair market rent with examples and common questions. If you want a deeper dive or written guidance to refer back to, this is a good link to bookmark. And next slide, please. I think this is going to be a poll. All right, so is this set up, Jody, for the poll, or are those? Should I read it through? And then we pull, oh, okay, awesome. Okay, so answer the poll. Use of COC leasing funds is capped at the lower of rent reasonableness or FMR amounts. Is that true or false? And then the second question, use of COC program rental assistance funds is capped at the lower of rent reasonableness or FMR amounts. True or false? Okay, that's all for my section. Thank you.
So the response for the first question, use of continuum of care program leasing funds, is capped at the lower of rent reasonableness or fair market rent. And then for rental assistance, it is not. So I know that Marissa walked through a lot of information and probably it seems that it is confusing information when we are talking about FMR and rent reasonableness and how do we calculate rent reasonableness and look at fair market rent. The tool that lives on SSF's website that calculates rent reasonableness and looks at FMR, it is pretty self-explanatory if you work through the tool. So please start using that tool because it is HUD compliant and well, you have to use it. And also we'll respond to any questions that you may have about that tool. So let's move on and talk about the leasing budget line item, costs and requirements. We'll start working through the different requirements depending on the type of funds your project receives. And again, we'll start with the leasing budget line item first. Next slide, please. Leasing funds can cover the leasing costs of units or structures providing traditional housing, permanent housing, or supportive services. Funds cannot be used to lease units or structures owned by the subrecipient unless there is an exception that it is approved by HUD. The subrecipient agency will hold the lease with the property owner and hold a sublease or occupancy agreement with the program participant. For transitional housing, as Marissa mentioned, the agreement must be for a term of at least 1 month and be automatically renewable upon expiration for a maximum term of 24 months. For the joint rapid rehousing and transitional projects, so the joint rapid rehousing, transitional housing projects, there are some exceptions on how those projects operate. Those projects have different requirements for youth on how the leases have to be structured. Because the rapid rehousing projects in a joint rapid rehousing, transitional housing projects prevail, if you will. The rapid rehousing, the youth that is in the rapid rehousing project component, they will have to have leases when they transition into the rapid rehousing component, or if they start in the rapid rehousing component, they will have to have leases as well in the rapid rehousing component. So they those leases prevail versus the traditional housing component lease. So we can talk more about those specific program types because it is a little bit more complicated. For the permanent housing component, permanent supportive housing, the agreement must be for a term of at least 1 year and again be automatically renewable upon expiration. The leases and occupancy agreements for the tenants should be present in the participant's file. For the leasing program type, because in fact, the subrecipient will have master leases, you will also have to have the master leases available in case of monitoring. The master leases don't have to be in the participant files, but they will have to be available when either SSF monitors your program or when another monitoring entity comes to monitor your agency. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of requirements for the leasing funded projects. Leasing is an eligible cost under the transitional housing, permanent housing, including permanent supportive housing, joint transitional rapid rehousing, and supportive services programs. Leasing costs can cover structures, portions of a building, or individual units. Length of assistance is up to 24 months for transitional housing, and there is no limit for permanent supportive housing. As it was mentioned before, the cost of rent cannot exceed the fair market rent or rent reasonableness rate, whichever is lower. You can cover costs above fair market rent with non-continuum of care funds. But again, we are not recommending that because, of course, you have to come up with those non-continuum of care funds. And those funds actually cannot be match funds because match funds have to be used for eligible continuum of care funds. And so those cannot be used part of the match. Vacancy payments. An agency can continue paying rent on behalf of a program participant that is in an institution for up to 90 days for each occurrence. In a leasing program, you can also pay rent until a new participant moves in. And this vacancy payment is unlimited. And this is different than a rental assistance project type. So again, this is a big difference between the leasing project type and the rental assistance project type. So again, vacancy payments are allowed and are unlimited. Security deposits and last month's rent, up to 1 month's worth of rent are allowed, and advanced payments are allowed as well. Property damage coverage out of the leasing budget line item are not allowed. They are allowed out of the operating budget line item, but not allowed out of the leasing budget line item. Next slide, please. Leasing funded projects within Sacramento community charge rent if the participant has income. All program participants must be treated the same in terms of the calculations applied using the continuum of care interim rule. The rent calculation itself will be covered actually in the next training that we will have for you. Occupancy charges paid are paid to your agency if you have a leasing budget line item, and those that rent paid is considered program income. These funds, the program income, must be retained by the project and used to cover eligible continuum of care program costs and not used for other projects. These funds must be expended to cover costs prior to requesting HUD continuum of care funds. Program income can be used as match. Again, two very important things for program income. Program income must be used prior to requesting HUD funds, and program income can be used as match. SSF chooses to impose an occupancy charge that is equal to no more than the highest of 30% of the family's adjusted monthly income, or 10% of a family's gross monthly income, or the portion of a family's welfare assistance. This component, the portion of a family's welfare assistance, is really no longer very much used nationwide. So really, the rent that the household would pay is either the 30% of a family's adjusted monthly income or 10% of a family's gross monthly income. There are inclusions and exclusions from income based on how the federal government is decided to have these inclusions and exclusions based on federal rules, and those are listed on the slide. And again, we'll talk about the income calculation in the next training that we will have. Next slide, please. Oh, we have a poll. Can we get the poll, Jody?
Please bear with me, y'all. Zoom is not being fun today. I'll get there. So the poll will be active for another 30 seconds or so, and I will share the results, and then we can move on, Liana, okay?
I'm not sure if anybody sees what I see, but I'm not seeing answers.
Yeah, the answers are coming in, and
Oh, okay.
generally we give the participants.
I'm not seeing options. So what I see
Yeah.
on my screen that is there are no options to select from. So I don't know if this is just
That's
me.
okay. They're participating. Yeah. Yeah. So it looks like maybe half of our group has
Okay.
responded. Yeah,
Okay,
we'll
so
give them
okay, so
just
if
10.
everybody else is seeing options, that's great.
Yeah, we'll give them just 10 more seconds.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Okay. Well, let's see what we have. Majority said funds may be used by recipient, subrecipient for any type of project expense, and equal to funds must be retained by recipient, subrecipient committed to project and used to cover any eligible COC program costs, which is the correct response. So funds must be retained by recipient, subrecipient committed to the project and used to cover any eligible continuum of care program costs. So that is the tricky part. The program income must be used for eligible continuum of care program costs. The program income cannot be used for ineligible continuum of care program costs. So that is the difference, right? You have to keep in mind that costs must be used for continuum of care eligible program costs. Okay, let's move on to the next topic, which is the rental assistance budget line item, costs and requirements. Next slide, please. There are different models of rental assistance. We have tenant-based rental assistance, sponsor-based rental assistance, and project-based rental assistance. The majority of projects in Sacramento are tenant-based rental assistance that we will briefly walk through each type because they have slightly different requirements. Next slide, please. In tenant-based rental assistance, and we'll call that TBRA for short, participants are able to locate housing of their choice in the private rental market. Rental assistance follows the program participant. Let's move maybe another slide. And another slide. Thank you. So if the tenant moves, they can take their rental assistance to a new unit. A program may require program participants to live in a certain structure or area the first year of the their program participation, if it is necessary for service coordination. All rapid rehousing projects must use a tenant-based rental assistance model. There is an exception for that for youth projects, different models of rental assistance, project-based rental assistance. So the exception is for youth type projects. But again, those are some exceptions. In general, again, tenant-based rental assistance is what rapid rehousing programs can use. Next slide, please. In a project-based rental assistance model, the rental assistant stays with the unit, not the participant. The project-based rental assistance are usually your site-based bills that come with your housing authority's subsidies, Section 8 subsidies usually. Subrecipient, the subrecipient contracts with the property owner, which is likely the developer, and the owner leases the subsidized units to program participants. If a program participant moves out of the unit is rented to another eligible program participant. And dependent on how your housing authority is set up and dependent on how long the program participant stays in the unit, the voucher may become portable and the program participant may take the voucher with him. So if the program participant stays in the unit for longer than a year and the housing authority has enough vouchers, then the voucher may become portable and the program participant can take the voucher with him, and then the housing authority is also allocating a new voucher to the unit, to the site-based, project-based unit. Next slide, please. In both tenant-based or project-based rental assistance, the subrecipient agency will hold a contract or a plan with the property owner, outlining the terms of the rental assistance payments similar to a housing assistance payment, the HAP plan. And if you work with the housing authorities, you know, you heard about the HAP contract or HAP plan. And the property owner will hold the lease with the tenant. Next slide, please. The third model is the sponsor-based rental assistance. The sponsor can be a private or a nonprofit organization, a community mental health agency established as a public or a nonprofit organization. The rental assistance stays with the unit, but in this model, the units are owned or managed by the sponsor. The subrecipient contracts with the sponsor who locates and rents housing units. Then the sponsor subleases units to program participants. This is very much like leasing project type. So the leasing and the sponsor-based rental assistance program are very similar. If the program participant moves out of the unit, the sponsor can then sublease the unit to the next eligible program participant. Rental assistance can be maintained if the program participant moves to another unit owned or contracted by the sponsor. Next slide, please. We have here some resources with examples of leases and sublease agreements that come from HUD. These are templates of lease agreements that are three-way leases between the subrecipient and the landlord and the tenant. So again, examples that you could use to implement in your agency. Also HAP contracts that, again, you can take a look at. Next slide, please. Recipients with rental assistance funds are also required to charge program participants rent. The exception in your community is for rapid rehousing participants. The charge of the rent for participants must be captured in your policies. And similar to how we talked about in the leasing program, your calculation of the rent charge to participants must be the same for all participants. The key distinction between the leasing and rental assistance project is that the participant rent here is not considered program income because the rent is going directly to the landlords. The exception is for sponsor-based rental assistance, right? I mentioned in the previous slide, that the sponsor-based rental assistance program is similar to the leasing project, but for the other rental assistance types, the project-based and the sponsor-based rental assistance, the rent goes directly to the landlord, and in that case, there is no program income created. In the sponsor-based rental assistance program, there is program income that is being created. So again, similar to the leasing funded project, participants must be charged rent, and it will be either the 30% of the family's adjusted monthly income or 10% of a family's gross monthly income, whichever is the highest. And again, the portion of the family's welfare assistance really is applicable just in very, very few situations, and it is no longer really used. The calculation of the income, as I mentioned before, and the details on what are the inclusions and exclusions will be discussed in our next training. Next slide, please. For the rapid rehousing programs, you are not required to charge program participant rent. And because rent is not being charged, there is also no program income created. For rapid rehousing projects, rental assistance, there are two types of rental assistance: short-term, up to 3 months, and medium-term, 4 to 24 months. And as we talked before, rental assistance in general is tenant-based, and there is an exception for the youth projects. Next slide, please. In 2026, HUD started to allow program participants receiving continuum of care tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA, to choose housing outside of the continuum of care's geographic area with certain conditions. This applies to households fleeing domestic violence situations and also covers non-DV households where project administrative requirements can be met. It is important to have policies for staff to use when these requests are made so that all participants are treated the same in these sometimes complicated situations. You have on these slides a link to these rules if you would like more information. Next slide, please. In summary, rental assistance costs are eligible under some transitional housing and permanent supportive housing programs. There are 3 different models, including tenant-based, sponsor-based, and project-based programs. Unit rent is awarded by HUD in your budget at fair market rent, but you can rent up to rent reasonableness rates. For rental assistance projects, a vacancy payment can be made up to 30 days from the end of the month in which the unit was vacated. Stays in institutions similar to the leasing program, less than 90 days, are not considered vacancies. Next slide, please. Lease agreements depends on the model of the rental assistance. The lease is typically between the participants and the landlord, except for the sponsor-based rental assistance, where the lease is between the subrecipient and the landlord. And then there is a sublease between the subrecipient and the participant. Security deposits and last month's rent, up to 1 month's worth of rent, is allowed. Also, advance payments are allowed. Property damages are allowed up to 1 month's worth of rent. So the difference here between the leasing program and the rental assistance program is that for the rental assistance program, property damages are allowed out of the rental assistance budget line item. And for the leasing project type, you are not allowed to charge property damages. In the rental assistance program, you are allowed to charge property damages up to 1 month's worth of rent, but that's it. And again, we talked about vacancy payments, leasing versus rental assistance. For rental assistance program, you can pay up to 30 days for vacancies, while for the leasing program, you are not limited at how much you can pay for vacancies. Next slide, please. Property requirements, and I think, Adia, you are taking it from here.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Anna, for that. Okay, so in this section, guys, we'll be discussing property requirements that are essential for maintaining compliance and ensuring quality standards. Next slide. So first, let's review the housing quality standards, or as we all know, HQS. It's important that housing units meet these standards until they are Inspire certified, which we'll go over briefly in the next slide. Each unit must be inspected physically before the resident moves in and annually thereafter. The owner has 30 days to address any deficiencies identified during these inspections. Additionally, HQS inspectors are not required to be certified. However, documentation of inspections should be submitted on the HUD HQS form, which can be found in the inspection form link provided. Next slide. So these are national standards for the physical inspections of real estate, which will be hyphened as Inspire. These standards apply to all COC funded housing units, including permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. The key points are inspections are required initially before occupancy and annually afterward. The compliance deadline for these standards will be October 1st, 2025. The main changes include an emphasis on resident health and safety over minor cosmetic issues and a focus on life-threatening, severe, moderate, and low priority issues. Self-inspections are permitted, but they must be documented against the Inspire criteria. Next slide. Lead-based paint, which applies to all households. So now we'll discuss lead-based paint requirements. All households, especially those in homes built before 1978, must be screened for lead hazards. Landlords should provide the disclosure of information on lead-based paint and or lead-based paint hazards form before signing any contracts. This disclosure ensures transparency and awareness. It's also very crucial to protect families from lead hazards by providing the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet at intake. Remember that all projects are responsible for providing this pamphlet and ensuring that all documentation is complete and the property is maintained. Next slide. So this is lead-based paint compliance issues. There are compliance issues related to lead-based paint. For example, lead-based paint visual assessments are not always conducted for all units receiving financial assistance if they were constructed before 1978 and have a pregnant woman or children under 6. Additionally, landlords or owners are not always required to perform re-inspections if the unit passed initial assessments, unless there's a failure or renovation. This slide highlights typical scenarios where lead-based paint assessments might be missed or not performed, which is important to keep in mind to ensure compliance. You can go to the next slide. This one's lead-based paint, steps to inform households. So here are steps to inform households about lead-based paint hazards. If the unit is occupied or expected to be occupied by families with children under 6, inform them about lead hazards. Advise families to look for housings built before 1978, which may have lead hazards. Provide the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet at intake. When conducting initial inspections, always evaluate for lead hazards and document findings accordingly. Next slide. And then this one will go over like staff training for lead-based paint. Staff training is vital to ensure proper handling of lead-based paint issues. Your staff should complete inspections as part of their certification process and their online training. And there's online training available, such as HUD visual assessment training. Additionally, for those involved in TBRA, there's specific training available, which can be found through the provided links. Finally, resources on lead disclosure rule are available online to help staff stay compliant and informed. You can go to the next slide. So this is the VAWA, a Violence Against Women Act updates. We'll review some of the recent updates related to the Violence Against Women Act, or VAWA. It has updated forms and procedures to better support victims of domestic violence, dating, violence, sexual assault, or stalking. These key updates include the emergency transfer plan and request form, which allows victims now to request transfers for safety. Certification of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and an emergency transfer request for victims of domestic violence. The collection of the VAWA emergency transfer data, it's essential that staff are familiar with these forms and processes to support residents effectively. And there's some links there for you guys to go ahead and check them out. You go to the next slide. I believe it's a poll. Yes. So on this poll, if a unit fails to meet HQS, the owner has 30 days to correct any deficiency. Otherwise, recipients one, may approve the unit conditionally for an additional 30 days. 2, are prohibited from expanding COC program funds for the unit. 3, must make repairs directly and charge the owner. 4, must notify the PHA and place the unit rent in escrow until repairs are made by the owner.
Thanks for your patience, Kadia.
No worries.
Yeah, we'll keep the poll. At least we're consistent. The polls are clunky today. We'll keep we'll keep the poll active for another 30 seconds or so.
No worries. Okay, looks like we got some answers. Looks like majority are prohibited from expending COC program funds for the unit. It's 47%. You must make repairs directly and charge the owner was 18%. May approve the unit conditionally for an additional 30 days, 24%. It's moving so slow. I believe it was 3 though. I was trying to get to it. Do you guys have any unanswered questions about housing requirements?
So the right answer was that we cannot spend any funds until the unit is not in compliance with the HQS requirements.
Correct. Majority got the right.
So we are at the end of the training. We got through all the training slides. So we are open for your questions. I'm not sure if we have any questions that were submitted through the Q&A, but are there any questions?
I will open up the opportunity now for the Q&A. At this moment, I don't see any active questions, and we will stay active here. Our recipients are welcome to use the chat function as well to add any questions.
And we have questions about slides, if they will be made available, and I believe so.
That is correct.
And we also we'll have a recording of the training.
Oh, wait.
That will be made available.
Yeah.
What other questions do you have?
If there are no more questions.
So there's a question about, will there be more information about the new inspection platform? So Inspire, the new inspection that will be in place effective October 1st, unless HUD will delay it again. The Inspire inspection requirements have been delayed at least 3 times by now. Training is available on multiple platforms right now through housing authorities, through state tax credit agencies. And I don't believe that SSF will put on a training on Inspire. It is a fairly complex training. So we do recommend that you actually try to find an Inspire training that you can sign up. It is about an 8 to 16-hour training, dependent on the entity that puts on the Inspire training. But that's my recommendation, that either you in your organization you assign 1 to 2 people that will get Inspire trained. Again, it's a fairly complicated training, and you send your staff to this training. Okay, next question is, we received new HUD forms from SSF in May. Should we have started using the new forms? Yes, please start using these forms. The forms that you have been using, they are not HUD compliant. So please start using the new forms right now. What if a HQS was not done before someone moved in? HUD feedback on that is that they could require all the funds that have been paid and for a unit that is not HUD compliant to be paid back because the unit is not in compliance. So I would highly recommend that an HQS inspection is done on the unit right now. Right, we don't know right now how HUD would react to a unit that does not have an HQS completed on it. So the sooner you do an HQS inspection on the unit, the better, because again, in HUD's view is that a unit that did not pass an HQS inspection is a unit that is not habitable, is not a unit for which HUD funds can be paid for.
There's a question in the chat here. Is the training for inspection free? And where do we find the agency?
And Inspire training are not free, not from what I've seen so far. It's not terribly expensive, but so far I have not seen free Inspire trainings. I have seen trainings that are around $500. That is probably the cheapest I have seen.
Mika, thank you for dropping in those links for our attendees in regard to the Inspire resources. So you can find that information there. We will also include these links with the slide deck when we send out a link to the recording and the materials. While we continue to hold space for several more questions, Liana, Kadia, Marissa, I do know we have upcoming trainings. Are you open to share a little bit about the next one?
Just putting up my calendar, we have on August 19, we have asset calculation training. And help me out, team. What else do we have scheduled?
Rent calculation is scheduled.
Yeah, there you go.
I got your back. Rent calculation is scheduled for July 29th.
There you go.
And then we have our following one, yes, Liana, August 19th, and that is income and asset verification. Links to those trainings will be sent in your email along with the materials here and a copy of the recording.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. And it looks like all of our questions have been cleared. There are no additional questions in the chat at the moment. Kadia, Marissa, is there an email our providers can direct their questions to that I can add in the chat?
Yeah, for now, it is still contracts@sacstepsforward.org. That is going to be changing pretty soon, but we'll send out communication when that time does come. But for now, it is contracts@sacstepsforward.org. Yes, thank you, Jody and Mika.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your time with us. And I'm talking to you, our wonderful participants. Appreciate you taking the time to be here. And as always, any trainings you've been on with me, I'm always grateful for the work that you do and appreciate you all. Thank you, Liana, Kadia, and Marissa, and of course you as well, Nika. We appreciate you being here too.
And
with
thank you all for participating. And please fill out the survey so we have some feedback from you on what we can improve on. And with that, I think we will end our training.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you.